Breaking tonight, the search for more possible suspects in a multi-state terror investigation, new video of a bombing test run, and claims from the terror suspect's father that he warned the feds about his son 2 years ago. Welcome to the Kelly File, everyone. I'm Megyn Kelly. In just the last couple of hours, we got our hands on the documents filed against Ahmad Khan Rahami, and they contain a ton of eye-opening new details. Rahami is now facing multiple charges, including the use of weapons of mass destruction. It's believed he purchased his bomb-making materials on eBay over the course of several months, collecting, among other things, igniters and the tiny lead balls meant to seriously maim and kill. Now, this comes on the very same day that his father repeatedly spoke to news outlets about his son's questionable behavior. He told reporters that he contacted the FBI about his own son 2 years ago. Listen.
When the FBI dropped the ball, did you talk to the FBI and tell them that your son was involved in terrorism?
And did you later retract that?
You told that to the FBI. You called them and told them.
Yes.
And what did they say?
They're not doing the job.
The feds say the elder Rahami ultimately backed off of his claims, and they could not find any red flags. Still, just 2 years later, Ahmad Khan Rahami would make international headlines, accused of planting multiple bombs. This new video appears to show him in the spot shadow, bagging his bags in Manhattan, shortly before a bomb went off, injuring 31 people. Also tonight, sources are telling Fox News that investigators are working on the premise that Rahami may have had help. In moments, we'll be joined by former CIA Director General Michael Hayden. But we begin tonight with our chief intelligence correspondent, Catherine Herridge, reporting from Washington. Catherine?
Megyn, the court documents released tonight show significant evidence of premeditation, with the FBI saying Rahami was buying bomb parts online, including shrapnel and circuit boards, as early as June. And just 2 days before the attack, there are cell phone videos showing what appears to be a trial run. An FBI agent describes what he saw, quote, "A fuse is lit and the object ignites. The video depicts the lighting of the fuse, a loud noise and flames followed by billowing smoke and laughter." A law enforcement source says the domestic dispute in August 2014 that got the FBI's attention was like a family brawl, with Rahimi stabbing his brother and punching his sister in the face, as his father explained to reporters today. The FBI interviewed the father twice, and in the second interview, the father withdrew his claims about his son's ties to bad actors. FBI agents are bound by these rules known as the DIOG, the Domestic Investigations and Operations Guide. And because Rahimi was a naturalized citizen, he enjoyed extra protections.
The bar was higher because the subject was a U.S. person. Sometimes the rules are saying if you don't have these boxes checked, you cannot go forward. Therefore, you must close the case.
And Fox News is told tonight authorities have made contact with his Pakistani wife, but there's no information on whether she is cooperating, Megyn.
Catherine, thanks.
You're welcome.
When we compared this bomb spree to other recent incidents, we found some disturbing patterns. American citizens visiting terror hotspots and then returning home to launch these attacks. Not only do you have the New Jersey, New York bombing suspect, but there's Orlando nightclub gunman Omar Mateen, accused police shooter Edward Archer, and San Bernardino terrorist Syed Farouk. Joining me now, General Michael Hayden. He served as director of the CIA during George W. Bush's administration. He was also director of the National Security Agency during the Bush and Clinton administrations, and now he's a principal at the Chertoff Group. Great to see you, General. Thank you for being here. And so,
thanks, Megyn.
There seems to be a pattern in terms of, you know, these domesticated bombers, whatever we want to call them. What are you seeing?
Well, yeah, Megyn, but things become more clear in the rearview mirror very often than they are in the windscreen. I saw Catherine's wonderful report there, and we're beginning to spin out a lot more information of things that we're now discovering about this. But fundamentally, Megyn, the challenge that the Bureau has when they investigate a man like this man is to identify not a criminal, but to try to discover what I would call the not yet guilty. And that's a really, really demanding task. And let me begin with a premise here, Megyn. Bad things happened, but it doesn't necessarily mean, it's not a prima facie case that anyone did anything wrong prior to this. This is just a really tough problem. We need to go to school on it. We need to take lessons learned, but we don't need to make war on institutions and people who are actually keeping us pretty safe.
Well, but meaning the FBI, who does a great job, but that doesn't mean there isn't room for improvement. When the average American sees the guy saying, "I called him up and told me he was a terrorist," right before he told him he wasn't, who cares what he said after that? It's like, radar alert. He goes off to Quetta, where you only go if you apparently are interested in making bombs or have some, not only, but it's a terrorism hotspot, as people like you have been saying on our air. People wonder why wasn't he more on their radar?
Well, you bring up a lot of really good questions. And again, Megan, we need to go to school on them. But the fact that he went to Quetta, I get it. That's kind of a Taliban homeland. It's also the home of 1 million Afghan refugees living in Pakistan. So it's not unusual for an Afghan to go back to Pakistan and visit Baluchistan.
Okay, I get that. But this
are.
guy's dad was saying that he was a terrorist and he committed violence amongst his own family. And the reports we got yesterday from the mother of this terrorist's daughter is that he hated America, he hated American culture, he started to get much more devout. These are all signs we've heard in prior terror cases. And if you're a trained FBI agent, or as you know, a trained CIA agent, you know what this means. That's somebody worth watching.
It's somebody worth investigating. But again, Megan, this is more clear in retrospect than it was in prospect. And you brought up some really good examples there. And I'm hopeful, I'm confident the Bureau is going to school on each and every one of those instances. But Megan, you've got 3 really clear cases that are the numerator for the number of investigations that the Bureau did on these types of individuals. The denominator is numbered in the tens of thousands. So we're relying on Bureau officers to make some really difficult decisions. By the way, Megan, one of the things we might want to look at is the authority that the Bureau has when they begin these assessments, preliminary investigations, full field investigations. How invasive they can be is actually controlled by things that we can change. So we might want to ratchet that up a bit. But frankly, Megan, I don't mean to be too pessimistic here. This is very hard, and we may be bumping up against some of the limits of what is possible. Yeah,
now we have a constitution in this country, but our friends in Israel have accepted much more erosion of their civil rights in the name of security, and we have this debate whenever there's a terror attack here, which sadly is becoming more frequent. General, great to see you.
Thank you, Megan.
So last night we told you about a handwritten note discovered near one of Rouhani's undetonated bombs. Now, a blood-stained, terrorist-praising notebook was uncovered during his capture, and it's providing further clues tonight into the story he was attempting to write. For more on that, we go to senior correspondent Rick Leventhal at the site of the Chelsea explosion. Rick?
Megan, I'm told the notebook was a diary of sorts. Rouhani had it with him when he was shot by police in that gun battle in Linden, New Jersey yesterday morning, and it was splattered with his own blood. It was an extremist rambling of sorts with praise for terror leaders Anwar al-Awlaki and Osama bin Laden. It mentioned the Fort Hood shooter. Ended with the words, Inshallah, God willing, the sounds of the bombs will be heard in the streets. Gunshots to your police, death to your oppression. The 4-count indictment filed in New York federal court tonight alleges Rouhani bought some of the bomb-making materials on eBay, as you mentioned, and it details how he drove his father's SUV into the city and back home before and after the attack Saturday night. He also is now facing 6 federal counts in New Jersey. I'm told Rouhani did not cooperate with investigators who tried to question him after he was captured, but that could have been in part because he'd just been shot. And now I'm told that close to 100 investigators in New Jersey alone are working to document Rouhani's travel overseas and his movements at home, who he talked to, where he shopped, where he might have built those bombs, and whether or not he had any help along the way. Megan.
Rick, thank you. Joining us now, Pete Hoekstra, former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee and senior fellow at the Investigative Project on Terrorism. Great to see you, sir. So your thoughts on whether this guy is likely linked to others who may have helped him in this regard?
Well, it's unclear as to whether he was linked to others here in the United States. I think one of the real things we got to be taking a look at, who he was linked to in Pakistan and in Afghanistan. And to do that, we need strong relationships with the intelligence communities in those 2 countries, because they're the ones that are going to have the eyes and ears into the Taliban, into Al-Qaeda, and into ISIS. And they're the ones that, can give us a tip that says, hey, we're hearing from our sources There's an American who's learning bomb-making skills.
Hello.
He's been there for 2 weeks, and he's heading back to the United States in March. That's the kind of information.
And then he comes back. Then he comes back, and it's not like he wasn't. He was questioned by Customs and Border Patrol when he came back over. He'd been over there for a year at one point, and yet there's no screening. I mean, even if there was, we've seen some of the screening. Are you a terrorist? That's helpful. So you can understand Americans' frustration where they're like, the guy was in Quetta repeatedly. He was becoming more and more devout. He was becoming angry. He was openly talking about hating American culture. His dad said he was a terrorist. Okay, I get that he recanted, but that doesn't happen to the average person. And they're saying, we love our FBI, but we have to hold them to some higher standards.
Well, what we also do know, Megan, is that in the last number of years, the FBI and other law enforcement agencies, they've kind of become politically correct. Organizations that used to go in and train the FBI and other local law enforcement about the things to look for when you are trying to determine whether someone may have radical jihadist tendencies. That training in many cases has been eliminated because it was politically incorrect and uncomfortable, and we don't want to be perceived as targeting Muslims or folks from the Middle East or from Pakistan or Afghanistan. These organizations, or this training, has been purged from the FBI.
And so you've got a combination of, you and General Hayden, who, of course, he was running the NSA program, where they were allowed to listen in only on a phone call that was between an American and a suspected terrorist. It's not just any American.
Correct.
And 9 times out of 10, they weren't listening to anybody. They were basically just collecting so-called metadata. Anyway, that program, he's suggesting something like it, something that would let us get more up into their business would be helpful. And you're saying that we've disarmed in the fight to a large extent. So, where does that leave us? Because I understand we've got Donald Trump, we've got Hillary Clinton, but I mean, do you actually see a difference in the country's safety depending on what happens here on November 8th?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, domestically we have disarmed. We should rearm. Internationally, take a look at what our intelligence capability in places like Libya and in Egypt. 6 years ago, these two countries were a rich source of intelligence, out throughout northern Africa and into the Middle East. Egypt and Libya had fantastic intelligence organizations. When America partnered with radical jihadists, the Muslim Brotherhood, to overthrow Mubarak and to overthrow Gaddafi, we lost those two entire intelligence networks. We are now basically blind in northern Africa. We see less into the Middle East, and other people who in the past have partnered with us on intelligence capabilities are much more hesitant to partner with us. So we have disarmed domestically, and we have gone blind internationally in some key locations.
Former Congressman Pete Hoekstra, good to see you. Thank you, sir.
Good, thank you.
We are also getting breaking news tonight on Ahmad Rahami's wife, how she left the country just weeks before the bomb attack, and how U.S. investigators have now caught up with her overseas. Former extremist turned anti-terror crusader Majid Nawaz is next. He's here in studio on her story. Plus, some of the biggest names in political forecasting are suddenly changing their election maps in favor of Donald Trump. Larry Sabato is one of them. He's here to explain why and what's going on. And then it took about 6 hours to go from shocking to very ugly in the much publicized split between Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. We'll show you how each side is reacting, what they're now saying, as the other woman now joins what's become a national news story. And what does that say?
People are just shocked, and social media is abuzz. People on the internet are going crazy because this was the Hollywood couple you thought would potentially be the one Hollywood couple that would make it through.
Breaking new details tonight on the tangled family web of terror suspect Ahmad Rahami and how much they may or may not have known about his alleged plot. Rahami's wife, who we're now seeing for the first time, apparently left the country just a couple months before the bombings. His mother left just in the last couple of weeks. And the fact that both of them were out of the country at the time of the attacks has some folks thinking that may have been more than just a coincidence. Trace Gallagher live in our West Coast newsroom with more. Trace?
And Megan, the timeline here is key because initially authorities said Ahmad Rahami's wife left the United States just a few days before the bombings, but now ABC News is reporting that Asia Rahami left the U.S. in June and was on her way back to America when she was stopped by FBI agents in the United Arab Emirates, where she is now being questioned. Their marriage is an important piece of the puzzle because the two met in Pakistan during one of Rahami's several trips to the region, including trips along the Afghan-Pakistan border, known as a home of extremism and a Taliban stronghold. Not only was Ahmad Rahami's wife out of the country during the bombing, so was his mother. The feds say Najiba Rahami left the U.S. for Turkey on August 24th. It's unclear exactly why. Rahami's other family members are also being looked at, including a brother who once posted a jihadi message on Facebook. But recent history tells us the wives may play the biggest roles in these types of terror investigations. Remember, during the San Bernardino attack, Tashfeen Malik, who died in a police shootout, was clearly committed to her husband's cause. A year before the Boston Marathon bombings, Catherine Russell, the wife of killer Tamerlan Tsarnaev, did an internet search asking what the rewards are if your husband becomes a martyr. Russell has never been charged. And in the Orlando massacre, Noor Salman, the wife of mass killer Omar Mateen, once drove her husband to the Pulse nightclub so he could scope it out. And on the night of the shootings, she feared he was planning to attack the gay nightclub and pleaded with him not to do anything violent. Again, Salman has not been charged.
Trace, thanks. Joining me now with more, Majid Nawaz. He's a former Islamic extremist, now working as an anti-terror crusader with the Quilliam Foundation. Majid, great to see you.
Pleasure.
So, the connection to the wife and her history and her departure from the U.S., just what do you think?
Well, as we've just heard, it's not something unusual. And actually what we need to be aware of is that with the process of radicalization, I think it's almost impossible for close family members, especially spouses, to not notice anything. And in most cases, they are aware and in some cases sympathize with their radicalized spouse. And all of the indications here point to awareness at least.
What do you make of the discussion we had in our last block about this guy traveling to, Pakistan, to Quetta, coming back, didn't get on anybody's radar, called a terrorist by his father, no problem apparently for the FBI?
Megan, you see, the city of Quetta isn't just a city you go and visit in Pakistan. I'm of Pakistani origin. It would be incredibly strange for me to visit Quetta. Now, I have visited Quetta, but I have visited Quetta to speak to hundreds of youth in the universities to warn them against joining extremist groups. The reason you wouldn't visit Quetta ordinarily is, first of all, Afghans aren't originally from Quetta. It would be strange for him to have family based in Quetta. If he went to Peshawar, I could probably understand it a bit more. But secondly, it's a conflict zone. It's like the average American getting up and going to see Belfast at the height of the troubles in Northern Ireland. It's a war zone. There's currently a civil war going on in Quetta. That in itself should have raised alarm bells for American authorities.
We've been talking on the show the past couple of days about whether we are turning into Israel and we can expect more of these attacks, and this is the new reality. What do you think?
Well, I'm clearly from Europe and from London. We've had a summer of madness and terrorism there. I think that the extremists have been planning to delay their attacks in America until it's closer to the US elections. ISIS on their chat forums, and I'm not saying this chap was with ISIS, but on their chat forums, they've been suggesting that they would seek to influence the US elections. I think they would favor a Donald Trump win because it makes it easier for them to radicalize others against America.
Why? I mean, just because he talks tough on terror? I'm
always wary of saying ISIS wants this, so let's not do it. I mean, at the end of the day, ISIS doesn't want us to breathe, but we still have to breathe, right? But it is important for us to be aware that extremists are interested in being able to point to a head of state that they can clearly identify as being antagonistic to them, which then helps their narrative in that they want to posit the West as being at war against Islam and Muslims.
But, here in this country, we've been having this debate about whether President Obama, who's, of the same mindset, I think he doesn't want to do anything to sort of play into that narrative that we're at war with the Muslims of the world, about whether he needs to call the enemy what it is, the war against radical Islam, not Islam, but radical Islam. Where do you stand on it?
Well, we have to absolutely call it by what it is, and there are major reasons for that. First of all, if we don't actually identify Islamism and Islamist extremism by its name, it makes it difficult, it makes it harder to isolate it from mainstream Islam and the average, ordinary, everyday Muslim. So of course then people are going to begin conflating the two. So one of the benefits of giving something a name is to differentiate it. Ironically, the very thing President Obama fears will come about if we are unable to name Islamist extremism.
And now, if you're advising the FBI in this case, given the pattern we're seeing, the profile of these domestic terrorists, I mean, if they're terrorists, but they're American citizens or naturalized citizens in so many cases, what do you tell them? What do they need to be doing differently?
Well, I think behavioral and psychological profiling is what we need to be looking at here, because of course, as we just saw even with your short film before, Catherine Russell, white American, who seemed to have been aware of her husband's sort of desire to die as a martyr, but we also know that there have been white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed terrorists. But behavioral and psychological profiling is really important. And if we were doing that correctly, then I re-emphasize that it's odd for, say, the Tsarnaev brothers to get up and go and visit certain regions in Central Asia the way they did. And it's odd for Rahami to go and visit Quetta. That is not normal behavior.
That should put you on the FBI's radar.
Yeah, no Pakistani, especially a naturalized American citizen who isn't of the ethnicity that belongs to the Quetta region, they're known as the Baloch. We know that Rahami was Afghan. No one who's naturalized in this country just gets up and lives in Quetta for a year. As I said, it's a conflict zone. It's incredibly unusual even for Pakistanis to go and visit Quetta.
I have yet to hear anybody come out and say the FBI needs more resources, we need more money, we need more agents so that we can track these down. We just keep getting told it's hard, it's really hard, but we're doing a great job, which is becoming less and less believable. Majid, thank you so much.
A pleasure. Thank you.
Always a pleasure seeing you. Well, with both presidential candidates now talking to voters about the terror threat in America, President Obama today made a big announcement regarding his role in the Clinton campaign coming up. Mark Thiessen and Roland Martin are next on that. Plus, Larry Sabato is here tonight on why he changed his election prediction map, which he hasn't changed in months, with significant gains for Donald Trump. Don't go away. It is now 49 days to the election. 49? Were we saying that yesterday? I can't keep up. Less than a week to what could become one of the most watched presidential debates in history. It will be, right? Don't you think it's going to be number one? I think it's going to be number one. And about 72 hours since terror attacks rocked New York City and New Jersey. Against that backdrop, President Obama today went to the United Nations, just blocks away from where 31 people were wounded, calling for the world to take in more refugees. Then suggesting that critics of his plan, critics like Donald Trump, are actually helping the terrorists.
If we were to turn refugees away simply because of their background or religion, or for example because they are Muslim, then we would be reinforcing terrorist propaganda that nations like my own are somehow opposed to Islam. This crisis is a test of our common humanity. Whether we give in to suspicion and fear and build walls, or whether we see ourselves in another. To slam the door in the face of these families would betray our deepest values.
Not only did the president use the United Nations for what sounded an awful lot like a campaign speech, news also dropped today of an unprecedented campaign blitz by Mr. Obama on behalf of Hillary Clinton, with the president reportedly prepared to devote at least 1 or 2 days a week to getting her elected between now and November 8th. Joining us now, Mark Thiessen, a Fox News contributor and a scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, and Roland Martin, who's host and managing editor of News One Now on TV One. Great to see you both.
Glad to be here. Good to see you, Megan.
So let's just talk about the refugee situation, because this is becoming bigger and bigger, and the immigration policies of the two candidates. The president today coming out and saying we need more refugees to come into the country, and Hillary Clinton saying, okay, they'll be subjected, however, to tough vetting. This is how she put it, Mark. Stand by.
So I am absolutely in favor of, and have long been an advocate for, tough vetting, for making sure that we don't let people into this country, and not just people who come here to settle, but we need a better visa system.
Your thoughts on that?
She was in charge of the visa system. She was Secretary of State for the first 3 years of the Obama administration. Why didn't she give us a better visa system when she had the chance, when she was in charge of the department that is in charge of issuing visas? I mean, this is the problem. Hillary Clinton both wants to run away from Barack Obama and wants to tie herself at the hip with him. They're going to be campaigning together twice a week for the rest of the up until Election Day. So she wants his support, but she also is going to be tied to his record. Well, what is his record? His record is, we just found out that the Department of Homeland Security Inspector General found out that over 1,800 people who were supposed to be deported because they posed a national security risk were given U.S. citizenship instead.
That's insane.
They confused the deportation order with a passport application. They couldn't tell the difference. This is our vetting system right now. And Hillary Clinton looks at that and says, let's increase the number of Syrian refugees by 500%. She's not doubling down on Obama's policies. She's quintupling down on Obama's policies. This is not going to do her well in the election coming up.
Roland, that number, that hasn't gotten a lot of coverage, but it's true. At least 1,811 immigrants who were supposed to be deported because they posed these national security threats instead were given citizenship.
Well, when you also have a country where you have people like when you had individual members of Congress who were on the no-fly list, it's no shock that we have bureaucratic screw-ups. Those are things that actually
That's a big one.
No, it is a big one. It is a big one. And my point is, that's why you also are to fix those things.
But
now,
you see as a political matter why it puts her in a difficult position to say, let's quintuple the number of refugees coming in.
Well, but again, first of all, as Americans, it's a little difficult for us to ask others around the world to do something that we're unwilling to do. Now, when we also made the point about her being over the visa program, remember, she also was working for a president. Mark, you worked for a president. You just simply couldn't do something on your own without that being the approval of the president of the United States. The bottom line is
Secretary of State.
No. I understand you. I understand what you weren't, but the reality is she still had a boss like you had a boss. That is the president of the United States. The thing here is this here. I don't believe that somehow the refugee policy is going to be somehow that major in striking her down. There are people who don't like the president, who don't like her already. And so I don't think all of a sudden they're going to say, I hate her even more so. But I do believe you do have Americans out there who understand from a humanitarian perspective where we are as a country.
What do you make of it, Mark? Because it's extraordinary to see a sitting president devote, 2 days of the work week to campaigning for someone running for office. I don't know if is he going to get a dock and pay? He's not really doing the people's business 2 out of the 5 working days.
Well, part of his job, I guess, is preserving his legacy, and he realizes that if Donald Trump is elected, it's going to be a big blow to his legacy. His legacy depends on Hillary Clinton getting elected, and she understands that she's running on his legacy. Look, after an 8-year term in office, the choice in election is change or more of the same. She is the candidate of more of the same. She's the candidate of what's happening in Syria right now. It was on her watch and Obama's watch. They did nothing while 500,000 people were massacred in that country and had no safe zone to flee the violence. And so the refugee crisis was created on their watch. And now they're coming out and saying, you're immoral for not taking more refugees. You created the refugee crisis.
On the other hand, though, Roland, if her legacy is he's got a 52% approval rating right now. It's been above that in recent days. And actually, the latest polls, we had this discussion last night, the latest polls on terror show her ahead of Donald Trump in all but I think one poll. She is outpolling him on who they trust more to handle terror.
I can guarantee you this. If Mark's former boss actually had a high approval rating, Republicans would not have been running from him in 2008. This is the reality of when you are a strong incumbent. If Al Gore was not being an idiot and not having former President Bill Clinton campaign for him, he likely would have won the presidency. All he had to do was win his home state of Tennessee or win Arkansas, and he wins the presidency. And so if you're a political party, you want a popular president. You want a president on the campaign. No, excuse me, Mark. I guarantee you, when you have approval rating above 50% and with the highest in years, trust me, you want that. And again, if Bush had comparable numbers in 2008, trust me, Republicans would have loved to have the president on the campaign trail.
All right,
so
I gotta leave it that.
You got to suck it up there, Mark. He's popular.
I gotta go. Great to see you both. Well, at least 3 well-respected election models this week changed in favor of Trump. Larry Sabato runs one of them, the most respected, I'd say, and he is next on what is happening here. Just 6 days until what could be a historic presidential debate. It will be, don't you think? And this Sunday night, we will have a special edition of the Kelly File, live with a complete preview of what to expect when Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump face off for the first time at Hofstra. I'm looking forward to this. Then, after the debate on Monday night, tune into the live Kelly File at 11 o'clock, right after the debates, with a complete wrap-up and analysis you won't see anywhere else with all your favorite guests. And here's why we think it's going to be such a big deal. In just the last week, Larry Sabato of the University of Virginia made some major changes to his otherwise unchangeable prediction map, which he hasn't touched in months, moving 12 states over further to the right, including 2 outright flips. Ohio and Iowa went from leaning Democrat to leaning Republican. Joining me now, Larry Sabato, who's got to be exhausted at this point. He's a director of the UVA Center for Politics. So that's huge, 12 states. You haven't moved anything in that map, and now it's a whole new ballgame.
And here's why, Megan. We were led by the data to do this. Hillary Clinton had maintained leads that were either small or large in all of those states really since the summertime. And then we all know it was expanded after the convention, but she's had a couple of rotten weeks. And either she's fallen back, depending on the state, or Donald Trump has gone up, or some people think Democrats just don't want to respond to the polls. But very clearly, the polls had changed, and they changed enough in Ohio to lean it to Trump, and Iowa, just about everybody agrees that is Trump's strongest swing state, so we lean that to Trump as well. But I think the real story here is Florida, North Carolina, and Nevada. In all of those states, you've either had very contradictory polls or polls that were dead tied, and so toss-up is the right rating for them.
And there was a poll out just today from Monmouth putting her up 5 points over Trump in Florida. But that's, they've been all over the place. Now, one thing we read this week was that the polls taken this week show she's doing better than she was doing last week. And so you tell me, whether that means she's rebounding, she's steadying the ship, or what it means.
I think probably it's returning to the prior norm, except for one big thing, Megan, that you mentioned in this segment. 100 million people are going to watch this debate on Monday night, more than have watched any debate in American history. So that's a reset button, potentially, depending on what happens, and there isn't a soul in the country who knows what's going to happen. Well, and that's the thing, is it's like, maybe it'll be exciting. It would be exciting just to watch, but query what the candidates will do under that kind of pressure. They're only human beings, They might not want to throw any real hard punches because they don't want to upset what is a tight race. Any predictions before I let you go? I think basically the supporters of both will be strengthened, and people mainly tune into debates to cheer for their side. But never, ever underestimate the power of any candidate to commit a terrible gaffe that does cause the numbers to shift. Well, that's kind of why we watch. It's like, watching the ice skating at the Olympics. What? That isn't nice. Great to see you, Larry. Well, thanks, Megan. Joining us now with more, Trump campaign national spokesperson Katrina Pearson and DNC committee member and Clinton supporter Robert Zimmerman. Good to see you. Good evening. So let me just start with you on this, Robert. Do you admit she had terrible 2 weeks?
No, she didn't have terrible 2 weeks.
She didn't?
Look,
12 states. 12 Larry Sabato states just got moved further to the right.
Excuse me. Let me point out to you that Larry Sabato, in his report with his new map, pointed out that Hillary Clinton certainly has the advantage of winning the election over Donald Trump. More paths to get to.
But
more paths to get to 270.
Last Monday, he was on this program saying she's looking great. Trump's in big trouble. And because the polling from her collapse and basket full of deplorables hadn't caught up.
Well, first of all, there wasn't a collapse. Let's also understand, Megan, I mean, I don't want to disappoint you, but you should be, in fact, maybe this will put your mind at ease, but Hillary Clinton in today's national poll, NBC's national poll, is up by 5 percentage points. But
now, let me stop you right there. As you well know, it isn't about my personal feelings.
I know that.
It's about the facts.
And the facts are, Megan, that even if you you take the worst projection. You assume that Hillary Clinton has 16 of the standard blue states for 191 electoral votes. That's lower than anyone's projecting. The battleground states in question, according to 538.com and others, give her a 70% chance of winning those states.
Okay. 538, with all due respect to Nate Silver, has been schizophrenic this election. They nailed it with Obama last time around. They've been, with all due respect, all over the place. You believe one day, the next day, completely the reverse. Let me get Katrina in here.
Okay.
Katrina, your candidate has had boatloads full of trouble, right, since he launched this campaign. But you tell me whether this has been the best 8-10 day period of the entire run for him.
Well, Megyn, I think this has been a fantastic time period for Mr. Trump. I mean, we keep wanting to remind people that Hillary Clinton has spent tens of millions of dollars in many of these states, and some that Larry didn't mention, like Colorado, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Look at Virginia and Maine, for crying out loud. Mr. Trump is doing extremely well, which is exactly
Virginia was typically red, but
many of these models have shifted.
But let me ask you this. So understanding he had this great time, what does that mean for his debate strategy? Because even though he's had a great 10 days, he's had like a year and a half of controversy preceding it.
Well, look, he's going to prepare the way Mr. Trump does. He's absolutely committed to going out there and campaigning in all of these states for all voters, something we haven't seen for a Republican candidate in a very long time. And he is ready to go up against Hillary Clinton. As we know, Hillary Clinton does have a record of failure as Secretary of State, particularly when it comes to the hot topics that many people are concerned about.
Katrina,
like
I think you did your
like
analysis.
The economy and like trade.
Excuse me, Katrina.
Let Robert get in here.
Someone that's going to get up there and actually talk to the American public about what he wants to do.
Let him
that's been extremely different.
Let him make his point, and then I'll give you the floor back. Go
Katrina,
ahead,
take a breath. Here's the bottom line. Katrina, I think you learned your political analysis at Trump University, because what we've seen in this election...
You're the rhapsodic one, George.
First of all, it's Robert. You've got a fixation on George Zimmerman, which says something else. The other point is what makes this election so unique is you see an unprecedented number of leading Republican experts in homeland security, in fighting terrorism, in our military, including now President George Herbert Walker Bush, now standing up and supporting Hillary Clinton because they regard Donald Trump as reckless, dangerous, and an incompetent
neophyte. Let her respond.
neophyte.
What do you make in particular, because news broke overnight that the former president, George H.W. Bush, is planning to vote for Hillary Clinton, Katrina?
Well, look, I think everyone is entitled to support whomever they want. There are many Americans who applaud the Bushes and respect their service.
Not Donald Trump, who attacked them in the line.
Some of the Bushes are going to be supporting. If it is true that some of the Bushes are going to be supporting Hillary Clinton, then I think that really offers vindication for a lot of the Tea Party goers who felt like Republicans were starting to govern as Democrats.
How about the generals who are supporting? How about the generals who are stepping up and supporting Hillary Clinton over George Bush?
The establishment is going to stick with the establishment. And what does it say when you have Republicans in a record number turn out for Donald Trump, and you have former leaders of the party just essentially slap them in the face? At the same time, Megyn, everyone's going to have to choose who best suits their values, and if Hillary Clinton represents George Bush's values, then that's his prerogative.
Well, clearly, Vladimir Putin
See, she was thinking of George
Bush's
H.W. Bush, Robert. She wasn't thinking of George Zimmerman. So it's great to see you both. I got to leave it at that.
Okay.
I have to talk about Brangelina, which I don't think Katrina and Robert want to discuss. It's over. But the biggest Hollywood divorce fight in recent memory is just beginning. News just broke on this before we came to air. Are you interested in this, and what does it say about us that we are? Also tonight, the marriage of Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt is on the rocks as Hollywood's biggest humanitarian superstar files for divorce. Trace Gallagher has the story. Trace?
And Megyn, so far, Brad Pitt's getting very little benefit of the doubt. Our corporate cousin, the New York Post, says Angelina Jolie filed for divorce after learning that Brad Pitt was involved with Marion Cotillard, the Pitt's co-star in the upcoming movie Allied. The Post says Jolie hired a private investigator who confirmed the two were fooling around on set, and that offset, the atmosphere was full of drugs and Russian hookers that Pitt got caught up in. But TMZ, which broke the divorce story, says it wasn't about cheating. It was all about Brad and their 6 kids, saying Angelina reached her breaking point last week over Brad's consumption of weed and alcohol, combined with what she says are Brad's anger issues. Instead of joint physical custody, meaning the kids live with mom but spend a few weekends a month with dad, Jolie is asking that Pitt get only joint legal custody with visitation rights. Pitt is reportedly planning to fight that. Court papers show that Jolie is asking him to keep miscellaneous jewelry and earrings and property after the separation. We should note that a few minutes after she announced the divorce, Megyn, There was an earthquake here in Los Angeles at 3.2. It is unclear right now if the two are connected in any way.
Unbelievable. All anybody was talking about today. I mean, unbelievable. Trace, we'll be right back. Thank you. Little preview of tomorrow's New York Post cover for you. Yes, that is Jennifer Aniston purportedly laughing at the end of the marriage. She's not actually. I mean, I don't know. What are you thinking? Facebook.com/The Kelly File. See you tomorrow at 9.